In a dramatic escalation of trade tension, US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order imposing an additional 25% tariff on all imports from India, making it 50%. And he cites New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian oil, which makes it 50% tariff. And this is the hypocrisy of Donald Trump. The move comes just weeks after crucial strategic and trade talks between the two nations, and that marks a sharp turn in US-India relations and raises concerns of economic coercion under the guise of sanctions. Trump invoked emergency powers under US law, calling India's Russian oil imports a national security threat, and warned of broader tariffs on countries engaging in similar trade with Moscow. But the Indian response was firm. MEA has responded to Trump's tariff, and I quote, "The US imposing additional tariff on India is extremely unfortunate. Several countries continue buying Russian oil in their national interest. India is not the only one. India strongly terms these actions as unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. India will take all necessary steps to protect its national and strategic interest." This is the restraint which India has demonstrated. In middle of it, Prime Minister Modi is also set to visit China for the SCO summit on August 31st. This will be his first visit post-Galwan and sixth in total. In another development, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval landed in Moscow today on a pre-scheduled visit, now gaining urgency after Trump's tariff imposition. Now, what is the big issue? Why has Trump not softened up? Why is Trump behaving erratically? Why is Trump imposing tariff on India? Is it because he wants to bargain? Because on 27, when tariffs kicks into action, the American team is going to be in India on 25th. That means there is a window of 48 hours. And then the friends of India are also upset. Former US ambassador to the UN and the fellow Republican leader Nikki Haley has now publicly questioned Trump's stand. Quote unquote, "India should not be buying oil from Russia, but China, an adversary and the number one buyer of Russian and Iranian oil, got a 90-day tariff pause. Don't give China a pass and burn a relationship with a strong ally like India." But what's the American reality? Before I go to my guest, I really have to put this on record. American reality is that it has turned into a sanction regime. Since 1949, US has imposed 486 solo sanctions. Urjit Patel, former RBI governor, says that the US has pioneered secondary sanctions on industrial scale, which relies on American financial system and supremacy of dollar. These sanctions have created problems for emerging economies, including India. India's Chabahar port project suffered precisely for this reason as US imposed sanctions on Iran in 2018. The worst part is that Trump will end up making India-US relationship a political football. Trump is actually destroying a beautiful relationship between India and the United States of America. He is almost trying to kill a bipartisan consensus in India as to how American and Indian relationship should be strengthened. This is the contribution of Trump, that he is trying to destroy a solid foundation which was built post-1991, started by Narasimha Rao, taken to another level by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and then by Dr. Manmohan Singh, and then ultimately by Prime Minister Modi. So what next? With both India and the United States locked in a high-stakes strategic dance, and Russia at the right center, the question is Trump going to destroy a solid relationship? A solid relationship? Because it's not only about business. It's about neo-imperialism. In the guise of make America better, Trump is penalizing other countries. I'm joined by Shelby Williams, political strategist for Republican Party from Texas. I'm joined by Ambassador Praful Dayal, who's also in the United States of America, former diplomat. Ambassador Jen Dasgupta, former ambassador to WTO. and my colleague Shweta Kothari from Business Bureau. Shweta, first I'll come to you. Shweta, just break it down in terms of business, and then I'll go to Ambassador Prabhu Dayal and to my other esteemed guests, where the impact will be felt most, and decode us. 27th, the tariff comes into action, and the 25th, the team is there. Is this a Janpat type of bargaining which is going to take place? This is what Trump has in mind?
I mean, if this is a pressure-building tactic, Karthik, then the window of pressure could not have been smaller. 48 hours before India can finally negotiate a trade deal. Now, we have seen dramatic shifts in policy and the relationships that US and India have shared. I think Trump has set back India-US ties at least 30 years. You were mentioning that India's Prime Minister's efforts in the last a couple of years, starting from Narasimha Rao to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and look at what's transpired in the course of last 1 week. First, we saw Donald Trump announcing a 25% tariff on Indian exports. Later, in a couple of hours from there, Donald Trump says there's going to be a penalty on India for some sort of relationship that it has with Russia, calling both the economies dead economies. And that's where it all started. And then from there, it's now ballooned to an all-out adversary that Donald Trump is making of India. A 50% tariff, if you are to count the 25% levy or tariff announced earlier, top it up with 25% penalty for continuing trade with Russia. Now, we've tried to break down some numbers. Remember, India-US ties, the relationship between the two countries, they are the biggest. US is the biggest partner for India, a trade relationship of $180 billion. India exports about $80 billion to the United States market. Now, what sectors are going to be most impacted? For the benefit of our viewers, of the 80 billion, 8 billion is only pharmaceuticals. So that sector is likely to be worst impacted if it falls under that 50% tariff bracket. And then on comes the textile sector, the auto parts sector, gems and jewelry. So various sectors that are likely to be impacted. Now, I was speaking to a lot of experts earlier today, and they are of the belief that about 30 to 40 billion dollars is what India stands to lose if 50% tariff kicks in starting 27th of August.
You stay with me, Shweta.
What sort of impact? Yes,
yeah, you stay with me, Shweta. You don't go away. Ambassador Dayal, is this, are we going to, is this relationship between India and United States of America going to survive Donald Trump, sir?
Yes, certainly it will survive, because what is needed is good diplomacy. What is needed is win-win diplomacy, and it should be targeted towards ironing out the differences. Look, when Prime Minister Modi had visited Washington in February, then both sides had set a target of $500 billion in trade to be achieved by 2030. Now, that will necessitate increased exports from India to the United States, and also increased exports from the United States to India. Trump is a businessman. He is using tough bargaining tactics, because you don't reach results which you want without bargaining. He's bargaining and he's being tough. We have to be realistic. There are many things that he wants us to do, and there are some which we just can't do. I think your expert Shweta pointed out that some of these concessions would impact the lives of farmers, but there are many other things which we can do. For instance, the United States wants to increase exports of corn, soya bean, and nuts to India. We are big importers of all these things. We are importing corn from Argentina and Brazil. We are also importing soya beans in huge quantities, because our domestic requirements are much, much more than our production. So we have to see what we can do to go a step forward in meeting US demands, because otherwise things will escalate. Diplomacy is about de-escalation. We have to try and de-escalate tensions. We have to try and work towards a trade deal. Now, for instance, the United States wants to export oil to us. We are going to export, or we are going to import oil from a number of countries. The whole point is to be able to bargain, set a price, and buy from the United States also. Because if we are serious about trying to reach this target of $500 billion, we have to also see what they want to export to us and agree to whatever extent is possible without damaging our own interests.
Okay. Your opening comments, Mr. Shelby Williams. How do you see this 50% tariff on India?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the comments that I think this is going to turn into a win-win. And President Trump is issuing tariffs because that's one of the main things he can do under the United States Constitution in terms of foreign diplomacy. And he is being tough. But when it comes to these tariffs, it's happening on a global stage with numerous countries. And we have, India is an ally in almost every respect. China is not. And Russia currently is not. So as we engage in diplomacy, foreign relations, and trade wars, it's with numerous countries all at the same time. India happens to be, I'll say, caught in the crossfire with our foreign relations with Russia right now. But in the end, we recognize that India is a tremendous ally, and we would like for India to have most favored nation status because free and fair trade between America and India benefits both our countries.
You know, Ambassador Dayal said that he's a businessman. I agree with him. But Trump is now the president, and he's not a real estate dealer. He's in the business of governing a country. I mean to say, you don't govern a country like that with an ally which has a very stable history with the United States of America.
Agreed. And again, that speaks to conducting these activities on the global stage with numerous countries simultaneously. If only America and India were in a relationship and none of the other countries existed, it would be so much easier. But for a very long time, there has been a tariff and trade imbalance between America and many countries in the world. And that's what President Trump is trying to address right now. And it's unfortunate that our relationship with India is caught in this right now because we do have a great relationship with India. And I think based on witnessing President Trump over this term and his previous term, this will end up with a win-win and stronger ties between the US and India.
But Ambassador Jain Das Gupta, this behavior is unjustifiable. I mean to say, EU can do business with Russia. China gets a 90-day pause. You know, the Putin doesn't listen to the United States of America. And Trump takes up casual with India. And the fact of the matter is, Hardeep Puri in his statement very categorically said that the oil from Russia was taken, which was also in consultation with Washington then, sir.
Yes, and it does seem unfair.
There are statements of Janet Yellen and of even the US ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti. But these were, mind you, Biden appointees. And they had said that, they had been very encouraging of India's diversifying its oil imports and buying Russian oil, because that would help stabilize global prices and avoid an oil shock soon after the Ukrainian war broke out. So it was done with the passive consent, if I may say, or active consent of the US at that point of time. And the G7 also supported it. And of course, till the other day, Europe was buying a lot of petroleum products from Indian refineries, which were basically produced from Russian crude oil. And Europe still continues to have trade relations, as the MEA press release says, $67 billion of imports from Russia of various kinds of things. The Americans are still buying not only low-enriched uranium, they are buying palladium, they are buying fertilizers, and there is no restraint. As far as China is concerned, the US has given a 90-day extension to China. Why? Because China has already twisted the arms of the US by stopping the supply of rare earth magnets, which has thrown many workers out of jobs in the US. So China has a strategic tool which it is not hesitant to use, and it will use it whenever the opportunity arises and should the situation dictate so. The other point is China, please don't forget that in the first term of President Trump, China had promised to buy $200 billion, import $200 billion worth of goods. That never took place. China also, as a retaliatory measure to the tariffs which President Trump had imposed in his first tenure, stopped buying US soya. And that caused so much of distress to US soya farmers, who are incidentally a major support base of President Trump, that on account of the distress, President Trump had to shell out $28 billion worth of subsidies to US soya farmers in his first stint. So China knows that it will be able to negotiate, and it is prepared to retaliate. It has said so. Unfortunately, India imports a lot of products from the US for which the US is competitive globally, and two, those products are required to keep the wheels of industry and the Indian economy going. So India doesn't want to retaliate by putting up barriers to US exports to India.
But then,
That is not going to take place.
but if
The
you,
last point I wanted to mention is, let us not confuse these two parallel tracks. One is about harvesting the first tranche, for which the American negotiators are coming on the 25th of August to Delhi. That is the sixth round of negotiations. That is a separate track. The other track is to have a reprieve from this 25% and now 25 plus 25. That is a separate issue. But of course, the two are interrelated. And should President Trump go ahead and actually carry out the 50% tariffs, that is going to have a huge impact on the future progress of this negotiations, which are going on in a parallel track for the first tranche and, of course, the second tranche.
Shweta, before I go to Ambassador Dayal, I think there was a petition which went to Piyush Goyal by the MSMEs industries which are in the business of garments and apparel, and they were pretty worried that, with these tariffs in place and now 50%, countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh will actually outrun Indian products. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh are likely to have some sort of competitive advantage, given that Indian textiles will now face up to 50% tariff. And that's a worry that even, farm sector had, and which is, for the most part, we knew. That's why the trade deal was not arrived at, Kartikeya, because India was very certain that we will not negotiate with our dairy and agriculture sector, which is where, US wanted a free access to Indian agri market, and India was not willing to do so, not just for the benefit of farmers, but also remember, agriculture, farmers constitute, the majority of those people who are going to vote for BJP, who are going to vote for, so it's not just a, economic issue, it's also a political issue, and it's rather sensitive at that.
Ambassador Dayal, before I get back to the issue of tariffs, sir, what happens to Quads, sir? Can you put it in a bigger perspective? What happens to 2+2? Because our engagement with America is not only financial, it's strategic, it has to do with tech. Then there's a people-to-people relationship in terms of universities, in terms of immigration, in terms of values also, democracy also. Indian people and American public share a lot of common things. But will this affect the other aspects also, sir?
Well, if this trade dispute and the tariff-related issues escalate, they will certainly impact all aspects of the bilateral relationship. As you mentioned, we are partners in Quad. We have the 2+2 equation. We have a multi-dimensional partnership covering a whole host of areas.
Yes.
Our effort should be to try and protect the overall relationship. Now, I'm not saying that we should cave in, but when you say that there is this particular delegation coming for trade talks and these tariffs have been imposed, then, as Ambassador Dasgupta said, they are interconnected. There is a connection between them. Trump, let us get used to it, is a very tough bargainer. He's a transactional person. And he has brought that approach from being in business to now running the country. He is looking at how to further American interests. And if he is being transactional, I think we should be prepared for it. We had anticipated this. Now, this pressure that is going to be built on us increasingly will certainly be in the context of the trade deal. We have to see where we can make concessions. If we are talking of reaching a target of $500 billion, then we have to see what the other side wants to export. Now, we are very touchy about dairy products because there are a lot of dairy products which we are importing. For instance, butter oil, whey, and we are importing skimmed milk powder. So we must try and see where we can start importing these things from the United States. Because the idea is to enlarge the relationship, enlarge the bilateral trade, and build a much more comprehensive relationship than we already have. And if President Trump's style is affecting things, it is certainly because he is bringing transactional attitudes into running diplomacy. We must make sure that the diplomatic pursuit should be win win. We should follow a policy of negotiating and trying to arrive at a solution. Escalation is not going to be the answer. Unfortunately, escalation is taking place from the United States. It is to pressurize us. We must sit down and iron out things so that de-escalation can take place.
I completely agree with you, Ambassador, that escalation is not the answer. Mr. Williams, as Ambassador Dayal said, the escalation is not the way out. If escalation is not the way out, which are the consensus or what are the consensus points, sir, then?
Yes, and as Ambassador Dayal points out correctly, President Trump is looking out for American interests, as is Prime Minister Modi. They both should. And were it not for the purchase of oil from Russia, then the tariff would stand at 25%, which I think is still too high for free and fair trade between the two countries. And I understand, of course, that India's economy is growing at a phenomenal rate and needs energy. So the arrangement, I think, that is going to feature in the upcoming talks is how to supply India with its energy needs without going to Russia and probably without going to China or Iran. Now, escalation all by itself is not the way out of this. Escalation so that both leaders, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, show that they are protecting the interests of their respective countries so that they can get to a point where they are able to say, okay, what do you need, Prime Minister Modi? What do you need, President Trump? That's what I've seen this play out with President Trump with numerous relationships with numerous countries. And that's what it always leads to, is that final discussion or series of discussions where we can get to what each partner needs most. And then a positive relationship usually comes out of it. And that's what I think we'll see very soon. And we saw that 90-day pause with China. I think we are very likely to see something similar with India, the tariffs on India, once the two parties come together and start really talking about details, particularly energy and jobs.
Ambassador Das Gupta, my concerns are slightly different, sir, here. It's like, this is like neo-imperialism. This is not a time and era where someone else's war can be my war. The First World War was a European war and the Indians fought. The Second World War was a European war and then the Indians fought. The Ukraine war is not India's war. Why should it impinge on us? And secondly, it's not only about trade, it's about choices. We as a country can make a choice, sir. We have a right to make a choice.
Obviously, we have a right to make a choice, and we are a sovereign republic. We have the largest population on this planet. We are a strong, vibrant democracy. All those things are there. And as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, please also refer to what Professor Jeffrey Sachs has been saying all this while. What happened to the Minsk agreement? What happened to, Russia's continuing, warnings issued about NATO expansionism? So there are many factors. Of course, I am not supporting Russia's war against Ukraine and the thousands of human lives which it has cost. But there are two sides to a story. And it is not India's war. India has said that both sides should come to a negotiated settlement. That is incidentally what Henry Kissinger also said soon after the war broke out in February 2022 that there could only be a negotiated settlement. Now, if one side keeps, putting all kinds of barriers and obstructions to even Ukraine, coming to the negotiating table, and keeps saying, no, you continue, we are behind you, and we will put sanctions on the other side. I think there will be a difficult position from which to arrive at a consensus, and this 50-day deadline, 12-day, 14-day deadline, all these kinds of things which are emanating from the US, these are not going to really help. What is the concrete steps that the US has taken to resolve this crisis, to bring it to a halt? So it is not our war. We are, distressed at the misery that it is causing to both countries, especially to Ukraine, because it is bearing the brunt of it. The lives which have been lost, the economic losses which have happened. But it, we are should not get dragged into this.
No, but
So that is one thing.
we always get dragged into it. You know, the sanction which Iran underwent in 2018, our Chabahar project suffered. You know, the sanction economy of United States of America, we suffered. The Gwadar is built and Chabahar is still there.
That's true. That's true. But unfortunately, we have to play the game according to the rules. So we have tried to abide by our national
But sir,
interests.
America, I just want to understand, you have practiced diplomacy, but this country is breaking the rules. It's questioning multipolarity. The rule-based order was an American order. Trump is breaking it himself.
Well, there are experts of international law who have written, analyzed the situation and said that what the current US administration is doing is totally against the established canons of international law, and this is akin to coercion under international law. Let us not get into that. The US has, the authority to determine what it would like to import at what tariffs from which country. As long as it does not pay heed to its own commitments and obligations to the WTO, so it can go ahead and do whatever it wants to do. That it is exercising that discretion, but it is of course illegal and not supported by international law.
Shweta, I'll come to you. Ambassador Dal, do you think that there is a new consensus in Washington on the issue of multipolarity? Do you feel that the American establishment's view has shifted on this issue? So that's number one. And the second perspective I want from you is how do you see the visit of Mr. Doval to Moscow and very likelihood of Prime Minister being in China on 31st of August, 5 years after Galwan, in middle of all this, sir?
As regards the visit of Mr. Ajit Doval to Moscow and the visit of our Prime Minister towards the end of the month to China for the SCO meeting, these emphasize the fact that our foreign policy is based on multi-alignment. We like to keep all options open and align our interests with as many countries as possible. So, if we have been actively taking part in the meetings of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, although China really tries to call the shots there, because we do not want to break off the sort of dialogue process that we have ongoing with China also. We want to iron out the differences. And if the Shanghai Cooperation Organization helps us in strengthening regional cooperation among all members, then it's a very good thing. Similarly, our relationship with Russia has been very strong. It's time-tested. And a visit like that by Mr. Ajit Doval is certainly going to be a positive factor in strengthening the relationship. I do not like to connect these visits with the ongoing tensions with the United States because, as I said, we follow a policy of multi-alignment. Now, what does the United States pursue? You ask me whether they pursue a policy of multi-alignment. All countries have to see with which countries they must have closer relations. But President Trump has been focusing more on bilateralism rather than on organizations which are multilateral in nature. He has pulled out of many multilateral organizations because he believes that he can achieve much, much more through bilateral negotiations. Now, let me also mention it is not for us to decide what the policies of President Trump should be. It is the American people who have elected him. They know what his policies will be. We have to face the reality of the situation and be prepared to negotiate with President Trump in order to achieve the best possible outcome for both sides. I've repeatedly said diplomacy consists in finding solutions which are win-win in nature. When you come to a policy where you achieve zero-sum solutions, then it hurts. So the Prime Minister Modi has a very good equation with President Trump. The need of the hour is to have them interact, iron these out, and the ongoing trade negotiations should be allowed to proceed. And we should be prepared to see to what extent we can go in meeting American concerns. We cannot take an attitude that no, whatever President Trump is saying is wrong. No, he is pushing American interests. He's a tough bargainer. He's a businessman. He's transactional. All that is well known. So, given these realities, we work out an arrangement which is beneficial for us and also beneficial for the United States. As I said earlier, there are many items which we are importing, although they are agricultural in nature, which the United States wants to export to us. Corn and soya bean are those. We are importing large quantities of these. Let's see what we can import from the United States. Similarly, dairy products. There are some which we are importing. It's not that we are zero importers of dairy products. Let's try and see to what extent we can meet the United States wishes in this regard and import some dairy items also. We should not have a closed mind. Rather, we should be flexible. And as I said earlier, we should work towards de-escalation.
But sir, the larger issue is Russian oil. He has not mentioned the agricultural issues. He's making an issue out of India's relationship with Russia. He's accusing us of financing the war there.
There are two things. Firstly, he has been talking about the overall trade deal. He has been saying that India's tariffs are very high. India's tariffs, in fact, he has used very strong language to pressurize us. Now, the second thing is the oil. That also is because the Americans want to export oil to India. And if we are buying from Russia because the prices are good, of course we are doing it because it suits us and it's as per our national interest. Naturally, it suits our economy. But from his point of view, he wants to try and make sure that we buy some oil from the United States. So we have to try and diversify our import basket from the United States and at the same time try to see what more can we export. So it has to be an arrangement which benefits both sides.
Sir, you must have heard the song and there is an old Hindi saying, kahin pe nigahein, kahin pe nishana. So if I have to go by Trump's logic, Shweta, you wanted to come in, please. Sorry, I kept, I made you wait so long.
That's fine, Karthikeya. I think, listening to all the panelists, there's one thing that's emerged very clearly in the past couple of hours, and that is Donald Trump said very categorically in his last tweet that India was ready to negotiate on every possible term, implying that perhaps we were also ready to negotiate on, farm and dairy sector. Just to answer Ambassador Prabhudayal, that perhaps India was also making concessions there, but it did strike to the US that India is not ready to budge as far as Russian oil imports is concerned. Now let's do quick mathematics. How much do we save by the way of Russian oil imports? About $10 billion. How much are we going to lose by the way of these 50% penalty? About $40 to $50 billion. These are rough estimates that many trade analysts are making at this point. Now it would be wise on India to maintain better ties with the US as opposed to buy Russia oil. All of that were maybe to be considered if US President did not make, did not choose his words very right, or did choose his words wisely, not call India a dead economy. But things have changed. I heard many of our panelists also suggesting that perhaps a trade deal can be arrived at. But I think, good that Trump is a transactional businessman. But this is politics. Politics is not business.
Okay.
One has to be wiser in their diplomatic stance. And I believe Trump is been belittling India far too long now for the past couple of hours. And that will not go down very well with our circle of politicians if India were to negotiate. So these are tough times. I would agree on that. And India will have to treat very carefully.
Okay. Before I close the show, Mr. Williams, your closing comments, do you think that this is just a bargaining position, rude language and nothing more, or it holds the capacity to strain the relationship between the United States of America and India, and also, I must put it on record, create problems in domestic political consensus on America and make it into a political football which had not been there for the last 25 years. At least from 1991 onwards, no one had a political discussion. There were no discussions on America in Indian Parliament.
Correct. And that was when President Trump's, after his first term, that ended before the war in Ukraine. And you're right, this is not, the war, Russia's war against Ukraine is not India's war. However, President Trump will fiercely defend America and American interests. That is his, and it always has been, his number one priority. His number one responsibility is to America before the WTO, before the UN, before NATO, and any other organization. And he will defend that as long as he is president. Now, the fact is that the Russian war in Ukraine threatens American interests. And so India's purchase of oil from Russia thereby props up Russia and extends to threatening American interests. And that's why we have this new tariff. But to answer your question, I think the tough talk, while India certainly is not a dead economy, we've seen this play out with President Trump before as well. And he will speak like that. And then when sides come to the table, he will offer praise. He'll offer the carrot and not just the stick. And that's where I think very soon we're going to see solid movement on the way of free and fair trade between both countries, which, as I said at the beginning, benefits both of our nations.
My only take is that a good settlement should not happen with a bad aftertaste. That's also very important in diplomacy, though the practitioners are sitting there right in front of me. Thank you all of you for joining me on this conversation.